Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Kuf Mem Gimel Amud Beis, 10 lines from the bottom. We're discussing Schitas Peiros on Shabbos. The Isser of Schitas Peiros, Midiraisa, is the malacha mefarek, when a person extracts the juice from the pri. In fact, sometimes a person will be over in Isser Diraisa by squeezing Peiros, while other times he'll only be over in Isser Dirabanan, and still other times he may do so lichatchila. We'll say there are three different categories. One category where a person is going to be chayiv midiaraisa for being soichet peiros on Shabbos, a malacha mefarik, is zeisim va'anovim, olives and grapes, since they are typically used for their shemen, their oil and their juice. Thereby, if a person were to then take and squeeze the olive or the grape, he'll be over in Isser Deraisa Mefarik. The second category are things that normally are not squeezed, but sometimes people do squeeze them for their juice. That category is Tutim V'rimoinim. There, if a person squeezes it and takes out the juice, then it's going to be in Isser Midirabonon. And the third category is things that are not squeezed at all for their juice. For example, like a plum. And therefore, if a person squeezes out for the juice, it'll be muter lichatchila. And therefore, the reason why zeisim va'anovim are the only things that a person who squeezes out will be chayiv midiraisa for mefarek is because the malacha of mefarek is taking the wheat berries from the stalk, taking one entity out from a different entity. So thereby, when a person takes zeisim va'anovim and he squeezes their juice or their oil, he's taking that which is called mashke and extracting it out from the pri. That's the malacha mefarik, by taking one entity from a different entity. Whereas when it comes to other things, even like tutim v'rimoinim, it's not considered to be mashke coming from a pri, but rather the pri coming from the pri itself. Since the juice is not typically what's extracted, therefore it's part of the pri itself. So the only isser midirabanan, as a chashash, where a person will then be soichet zeisim va'anovim. And when a person then will squeeze, we said plums, there certainly is not going to be a mashka, and that's even muter lechatchila, because nobody normally squeezes out the plums for their juice. The Gemara said in the previous brisa that although there's a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim in regards to the juice that was already oozing out on Shabbos, whether you can use that juice or not, it explained that Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the Chachamim if it's juice that was squeezed out from zeisim oozed out from zeisim va'anovim, that's also, you cannot use that juice. Because a person then may squeeze the zeisim va'anovim in Isser Diraisa. Then it said that the Chacham would agree with Rabbi Yehuda in regards to, let's say, a plum. If you have juice that is going to be sitting next to that has been oozed out of the plum, that even the Chacham would agree that you can use that juice, just like Rabbi Yehuda says. The machloikis between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim for juice that has already been oozed out is in regards to tutim v'rimoinim. There, the Bryce had stated that the Chacham said it's always going to be aser, whereas Rabbi Yehuda said it depends. If you bought this tutim and rimonim for oichel, for the purpose of consumption to eat them, then the juice that has then oozed out from the tutim and rimonim are mutter. There's not going to be a chashash that you're going to come to then squeeze them. But if you bought them for their juice, or you bought them not for one way or the other, stam, then Rabbi Yehuda says, and then it would be also to use that juice. Ask the Gemara, V'sava Rabbi Yehuda stam aser? Does indeed Rabbi Yehuda say that stam, the juice of the tutim rimonim that has oozed out, that would be aser? The Gemara now challenges from the following Mishnah. It's a Mishnah that is in Machshirin, at the end of Masechet Machshirin. And towards the end of this Mishnah that we're quoting, at least here, will then bring the question on Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, bringing the Mishnah. V'hatnan, it states, Chalev ha'isha mitame l'rotzon v'shel l'rotzon. When it comes to the milk of a woman, so that milk, whether she is taking out that milk b'rotzon, that means that she's nursing, let's say, her child, or that milk drips out, either way, it will be mitame. That means that it will be machshir. That means that if a sheretz were to fall on an item where that milk had already, let's say another piece of food where that milk had already fell upon, then it'll become tameh. If indeed the milk itself is tameh, then it will also mitame other food and drink. The Mishnah goes on to say, whereas it comes to the milk of an animal, let's say a cow, it will only be mitame if it's coming out l'rotzon, when a person is going to then milk the cow. Rabbi Akiva argues on this Tana Kama. Kal v'chomerhu. It's a kal v'chomer to say that the milk of an animal should also mitame even if it goes out shaloi b'rotzon, if let's say it drips out. Uma chalev ha'isha she'eno miyuchod ela lektanim mitame l'rotzon v'shelo l'rotzon. When it comes to a mother's milk, there we say it's only going to be normally fitting for a katan. An adult doesn't consume mother's milk, and still it's mitame bein l'rotzon bein shelo l'rotzon. Chalev ha'behema shemiyuchod bein lektanim bein legedolim eno din sheyitame bein l'rotzon bein shelo l'rotzon. Whereas it comes to the milk of an animal, let's say a cow, there it's for consumption for both the adult as well as the child. And there, certainly, therefore, it should then be mitame not only b'rotzon, but also shelo b'rotzon. So Rabbi Akiva is left with this kal v'chomer. He's explained to the Chachamim that certainly, even the shelo b'rotzon, the cow's milk should then mitame. Amru loi, the Chachamim say back to Rabbi Akiva, im timei chalev ha'isha shelo l'rotzon. Why is it that the milk of a woman is metama even shelo b'rotzon? It's considered to be a mashke, because shedam magefosa tameh. Because a dam from the wound of a woman, let's say she had a cut on her hand, that dam that would come out from that cut, that would also be metame. So yetame chalev habehema shelo l'rotzon shedam magefosa tahor. But when it comes to the dam from a cut of an animal, the wound of an animal, that is not mitame. And therefore, when it comes to a woman whose dam from the cut of a wound is mitame, and we say that when it comes to the blood of a woman, let's say, then the dam nekar v'naseh cholav. Ultimately, the milk of the woman comes from the dam. And therefore, if the dam is considered to be a mashke, so therefore the milk is considered to be a mashke too. And that's why it's only going to be by a woman, bein l'rotzon, bein shelo l'rotzon. Whereas it comes to a behema, where the behema, the dam from a wound, is not mitame, it's not considered to be a mashke. And therefore, only if it's berotzon does the cholav of a behema go into mitame. We're on top of Kuv Mem Dalam and Aleph. Omar lehen, Rabbi Akiva responds to the Chachamim. Machmir ani becholov mi badam. He says there's no distinction between l'rotzon or she'en lo l'rotzon gabe cholov. And by cholov, I'm more machmir than bedam. As follows: when it comes to an animal, shahachoylev l'refuah tomei, va'amakis l'refuah tor. When it comes to then milking an animal to alleviate the animal from excessive milk, that's going to be metame. That milk will be metame. Whereas it comes to the bloodlet from an animal, that will not be metame. So therefore, I'm machmir when it comes to cholav more than when it comes to dam. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva maintains that there's no distinction between the cholav that comes out from a behema, whether it's berotzon or shelo berotzon. Each one should be metame. Says the Chacham back to Rabbi Akiva, Amru loi, Salei zeisim va'anovin yoichichu. The basket of Zeisim and Anovim will prove against you. Shehamashkin hayotzim mehen l'rotzoin mitamin sheloi l'rotzoin taharim. Because the juice or the oil that comes out from that olive or that grape, those will then be metame if they are going out beratzon, but if shalom beratzon, they're tahor. So the Gemara now adkan the Mishnah. Now the Gemara comes back to then medayik this to then bring its question on Rabbi Yehuda. My lav leratzoin hanich denichalei shaloi leratzoin bestama. Is it not that the kavana is when it says shaloi? So when it says beratzon, it means that it's nichat to the person, that he wants the juice of the zeisim and novim, and when he does not want it, means he doesn't say anything, and that's considered shaloi l'ratzon, that's bestama. And there we saw it's taharim. Uma zeisim v'anovim de bnei meschita ninhu. And still, when it comes to zeisim anovim, those things are typically used for their oil or for their juice. Shaloi l'ratzon v'loi klum. And still, when it's shaloi l'ratzon, it's nothing, it's tahor, it's not considered to be a mashke. So then tutim v'rimonim de la b'nei schita ninu lo kol shekein. Then tutim v'rimonim, when it's stama, meaning it's shlo b'ratzon, it's certainly not a mashke. So how can Rabbi Yehuda say that the stama of the juice that has oozed out from tutim v'rimonim is considered to be a mashke that we're concerned about, that a person then may go ahead and squeeze out? Certainly it's not considered to be a mashka, we see from this Mishnah. And even the Chachamim over here in this Mishnah, even if we're not be Rabbi Yehuda, but the Chachamim are saying that indeed, that when it comes to Zeisim ve'anovim, a person is not beratzon because the stama is he's not beratzon, and it's still considered to be tohor, it's not mashke, then certainly when it comes to tutim v'rimonim, and Kol Shekain Rabbi Yehuda would say that it's just considered to be not mashke. So why does Rabbi Yehuda say over there in the previous brayso on Amud Beis that indeed the juice that has been oozed out from the tutim v'rimonim are asur? Answers the Gemara loy. It's not so. You misunderstood. Your assumption in the brayso was wrong, or in this mission was wrong. L'ratzoin is bestama. When it's beratzon, it means that's bestama. It means that he wants it. Shaloi l'ratzoin, the gali adaite. Do omar loy leichali. But shaloi l'ratzoin means that he's explicitly saying he does not want it. So the whole understanding of this brayso was incorrect. When it said over here bestama, it meant to say it was beratzon. Not like we thought before that stama means shaloi beratzon, and therefore it's not a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda because a stama is beratzon, and therefore the tutim and rimonim who have juice that has oozed out with stama means that he would want it, and therefore it's asur on Shabbos according to Rabbi Yehuda. The boys aim alternative we can explain. Shiny salizeisim v'anovim. Over here in this Mishnah that we just asked from, when it comes to the salizeisim v'anovim, it's different. The reason why over there, when the juice or the oil comes out and it's considered to be tohor, it's not mashke, is because kivan the liibud kaimi mikara afkuri mafkelu. Since the juice or the oil slips through, we're talking about a basket, thereby a person's mafkir. That's why the stama indeed would be shaloi l'ratzoin. But in the brayso before, the stama that Rabbi Yehuda says has oozed out from the tutim rimonim, he would want it, and therefore that's different because not it's coming from a basket, there it's coming from an enclosed kli. Now the Gemara goes back to that which it said before, that indeed the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the Chachamim in regards to Zeisim v'anovim, that the oil or the juice that has oozed out is going to be asur because the person might then be soichet the Zeisim v'anovim. And indeed, the Gemara had said also that the Chacham agreed with Rabbi Yehuda. Ask the Gemara, Ashkoch and Rabbi Yehuda the Rabbanan b'Zeizim v'anovim. We find indeed that Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the Chachamim with the oozing out of the oil or the juice of the olive or the grape that is asur because the person might soichet the olive or the grape. that the Rabbanan the Modi le Rabbi Yehuda b'Shar Peiros Minolan. Where do we see that the Rabbanan would agree with Rabbi Yehuda in regards to Shar Peiros? That we said is the other extreme. That when it comes to, let's say, plums, and a person would squeeze that out, or rather would have juice that has been oozed out from the plums, then even the Rabbanan would agree with, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree with the Rabbanan. Sorry, even the Rabbanan would agree with Rabbi Yehuda that that's going to be something that's mutter. Where do we know that from? Says the Gemara, bringing the following brisa. D'Tanya, Soichtin, we're on the top of Kuv Mamdalid Amud Beis, Soichtin bifgin ubefrishin uvizrodin avaloi b'rimonim. States over here in the brisa that one can squeeze plums or quinces or types of pears, avaloi b'rimonim, but not pomegranates. These three fruits, plums, quinces, and pears, nobody uses it for their juice, and therefore lichatchila you can squeeze, says the brisa. But when it comes to rimonim, sometimes people do use the pomegranate juice, and therefore they do squeeze them, so it's asur midirabanan. The Gemara now brings a case of this. V'shel beis Menashya bar Menachem hayu soichtim b'rimonim. They would soichet rimonim during the week, and therefore on Shabbos it would be asur midirabanan. So the Gemara says, Umamai, how do you have a proof from this brisa that indeed the Rabbanan agree with Rabbi Yehuda? The Rabbanan, how do you know this is indeed Rabbanan in this brisa? Dilma Rabbi Yehuda, maybe this brisa is altered by Rabbi Yehuda. And indeed, he's the one who says that the juice that has oozed out from Shar Peiros is muter lechatchila to use. So Gemara says, "V'tahavei nam Rabbi Yehuda." Let us even say that it's Rabbi Yehuda in this brisa, but still, Eimor deshamas leila Rabbi Yehuda yatzu me'atzmon. When did we hear from Rabbi Yehuda that it's mutter? That's when the juice has oozed out on its own. Then you can use the juice on Shabbos. But soichtin lechatchila mishamas le, that you can be soichet lechatchila. These Shar Peiros, where do we see it? Where do we hear that from? Elamai, it must be Islach Lameimar. You can say Kivan de Labene Schita Ninhu Afil Lechatchila. Since these types of peros, again quinces and plums and these types of pears, which are not used for their juice whatsoever, if a person wants to squeeze them on Shabbos Lechatchila, he can do so. So if that's the case, then Afilu Teim Rabbanon. Then you can even say the Rabbanon. Even they would say you can go ahead and squeeze them. And if that's the case when it comes to squeezing these types of fruits, then certainly when it comes to the juice that has oozed out, you can use that juice on Shabbos. Shma mina, Rabbanan Shma mina. Therefore we can derive that indeed the Rabbanan would agree that with Rabbi Yehuda that the juice from Shar Peiros that have already oozed out can be used on Shabbos.